Thank you for joining us. And now we have Shalvi Mahajan, who will talk about gender bias in artificial intelligence. Shalvi is an AI scientist working at SAP. Shalvi, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Noah. Hi, I'm Shalvi Mahajan, and I'm data scientist or AI scientist at SAP SE, located in Munich, Germany. And today we'll talk about gender bias in artificial intelligence. So first, I'll start with the references, the context from where this problem arose, and then we'll talk about the different sources for such as gender bias in AI, and then we'll move towards the impact that it's having on the society, on the women, and what's wrong going on there. And then we'll discuss about how to overcome it from a machine learning perspective and then from a social perspective. And finally, we'll also discuss a little bit on reshaping the future. And let's see how it goes. Okay, so first of all, the context. So every one of you knows that machine learning or artificial intelligence should be neutral, but it does have same bias as we have in the data. That's obvious, right? So the model we train, create, everything is the reflection of ourselves because it comes from the data which the humans have collected in the end. And so few of the examples to give better references. So for example, the translation tools that we have, they always relate doctor with a man, while nurse with a woman, which is not the case every time, right? And this shows, so while translating the languages that uses the pronouns as a man or women, they definitely know, like doctor is associated with man and nurse with a woman, which is definitely not true. And another example, so I recently read a story where the couple, they applied for so women and men, they applied for a credit card limit, and both of them had same credit history, but women got less credit card limit than the man. And that's also one of the examples because it might have been automated in AI or done something from AI which would have given such results. But why the difference when everything, the credit history and everything is the same? So these are a few examples, and you might even know more examples, but the main context is that currently the AI systems that we use have such bias embedded. And how should we now overcome it? What's the impact and so on? That is what we are going to discuss today. So where does this AI bias comes from? What is the source? So basically, machine learning algorithms, they take lots and lots of data. The data, then we make predictions on that data by like learning from some patterns and so on. And the data with gender bias is also created by professionals in AI and data science fields or in other fields, but there are also, so for example, if I tell you about my field, only 22% of professionals are in AI and data science fields are women. So first of all, the humans are generating, collecting, labeling the data that goes into the data sets, and there we have already the bias. And then humans are the ones who are determining what variables to use, how to tune your machine learning algorithm, or how to even make these algorithms to make predictions. So there's embedded bias you can see here. It's not just the data, but also in the data where it's coming from, right? Then the data is definitely a point, but the data is being collected, let's say, for example, from your technological devices, your smartphones, and only in these middle income or low income countries, there are 20% less likely women who have smartphone than men. And these technologies generate data about their users. And so the fact that women have less access to them inherently skews the data sets, right? Even when the data is generated, humans collecting data decide what to collect and how. So already the data set that we were collecting was more having men's data. So the skewness was already there. And then humans are again filtering the data, deciding what to collect and how and so on. So the source already has less women in the back end who can give us data. So this definitely paints an inaccurate picture, concealing important differences between people of different gender identities and hides potential overrepresentation or underrepresentation. Even now, now the next step is labeling the data. That's also done by humans, right? So it's also embedding harmful biases and perspectives. So recently, I also read that this from one of the article, which was very nice. So the Gender Shapes Research Project actually found that the facial recognition system that they were using used image data sets that lack diverse and representative examples. How? Because they often misclassified women images more often than men. And in particular, the dark-skinned women were misclassified at an error rate of 35% compared to 0.8% for lighter-skinned men, which is absolutely wrong, right? In terms of social aspect, but you know where it's coming from. The data set already lacked diversity, the representation, which is not so fair, right? So after we have now, okay, we got the data, maybe let's say we got the diverse data, but then the feature engineering on top of it is also sometimes, because if the data is not too diverse, then the feature engineering might also introduce much more bias than already is. So for example, in the field speech synthesis, text to speech technology or speech to text, it mostly didn't recognize female speakers properly as compared to males. And it's also, again, the reason that the data set didn't have proper diversity in examples. And then on top, the feature engineering that we did also didn't have proper diversity. We could potentially do feature engineering in such a way that the diverse examples are also taken care of if even they lack in the data set, but then the feature engineering can make sure somehow that it adds some diversity to the final data set. But if we don't do it and we just take the original data set that we have, which is already biased, then the feature engineering would also have biasing, and thus the modeling techniques, right? So what is the impact of such a bias? So basically, this is actually impacting and creating setbacks in gender equality, women empowerment, because these such kinds of AI systems are in the end being used for most of the tasks which are socially available, like bank related credit statements or any other, even the hiring in the company sometimes, right? And if such AI systems have gender biasing, this can be really wrong. So recently, I also read this in one of the articles that Berkeley has Center for Equity, Gender, and Leadership. There was some analysis done on mitigating bias in artificial intelligence, and in the analysis of around 133 bias systems across industries, they found that 44.2% demonstrate gender bias and 25.7% exhibit both gender and racial bias. So this is something that we need to definitely think about where it's going and how we can overcome it. So usually there are 6 impacts. So I can also talk about them in more detail in the next slides. So first of all, lower quality of service for women and non-binary individuals. So for example, this voice recognition system that we talked about, or the speech synthesis, they are often performing worse for women. So it's already giving lower quality of service for women. It's not useful for them, right? And then second, the unfair allocation of resources. For example, I talked about the hiring, right? So it's already, if we are using such a system, AI system, which already doesn't properly distinguish between male and female and favors male because the dataset had male attributes for hiring, this can deprioritize women's application, which is not correct at all. Then there are also the harmful impacts that we are reinforcing such stereotypes and prejudices in the normal environment or the future that we are building. For example, this doctor and nurse example, we are already reinforcing stereotypes of male doctors and female nurses, which is again very wrong. So there are also erasure of like other gender identities. We are not talking about gender binary or any other identities. We are most, because the facial analysis system or other AI systems do not recognize them at all. So women are often less rated, but then the other gender identities are not even being talked about. And then in addition, this is also imposing really mental effects to women, because they are constantly in the pressure. For example, when hiring, they know their applications are so often rejected and they don't know the reason. This is already mentally not so good for them. Then it's also about the safety. So for example, the skin cancer detection AI systems that we are using, if they are also based on the biased data already, then it's very difficult to detect melanoma for the women. And it has been seen that it's difficult to detect melanoma for Black women in specific, which is already serving very bad impact, because in the healthcare industry, they are letting them believe that that's the result, but then they are also putting people at risk who are not being detected by such AI system. For example, the skin cancer detection, that's not at all correct. So these were the 6 major impacts that I see, and I've also read in the blogs. And so the best practices to overcome these bias is that we need to ensure that the diversity happens in all the training data that we are using. We should roughly have a same proportion of female samples as the male samples. Then, and we should ensure that the labeling is done from humans which are from diverse backgrounds and not just only one gender identity. Then I really like the third point, because it also, so while computing the accuracy or the performance metrics of the machine learning model, we should definitely consider different demographic categories and to identify which one category is being treated unfavorably. Because if we compute the performance metrics of different clusters, so let's say different gender identities or different diversities and so on, then we will know that, okay, so on the women, the accuracy or the performance metrics are not performing good at all. So then we will do something about it. But if we deploy such a system already just computing the accuracy over the whole training, over the whole data set, the test data set, and then it's a problem, because we don't know how it performed on the different diverse examples. Then we should also solve for unfairness. If we see some unfairness, we should definitely collect more training data that has the diversity with sensitive groups. But also there is also one way, just like reinforcement learning, you can have some penalty if there happen some errors like that. And for having such an unfairness, you can introduce some additional penalties, and then the AI should know which way to proceed next. So I think the last slide was definitely from the machine learning perspective, how can we overcome bias? So definitely we should focus on diversity in the training sets. We should also embed and advance gender diversity, equity, inclusion among the teams that's developing such systems. So the data set, the second point is about the data set. Then the algorithms should be well tuned, like the penalty for errors, or then the performance metrics should be defined for different clusters, different segments of the data. Also, definitely we should center the voice of marginalized community members, women, non-binary individuals in the development of AI systems. And it is also a topic of AI ethics, right? So there we should ensure that there is gender diversity. There we should have codes and principles, think critically about how to incorporate justice and equity related to gender and other marginalized identities. So these are some starting points that we can definitely try to start with, and maybe in future, in some months or years even, we can build a better world for future generations. Now comes the social aspect. So socially, definitely we need to use feminist data practices to help filling the data gaps. So feminist data can help center the voices and the experiences of marginalized individuals, including women and girls. So this is one thing that we can do. Then we can advocate for AI diversity and let women speak and join most of the conversations, and have equal proportion of males and females, so that everyone can help mitigate such gender bias. And in considering or using AI systems to tackle gender gaps, think critically about who is represented on the team that is developing AI system, as well as what data they are using and how to develop the algorithm. But the main focus is that we should let women be included in most of the different fields so that their voices are also being heard. So this makes comes like the end, almost the end of the slide slide deck that I have, like reshaping the future now. So we've talked about quite long that how we can overcome the bias, how we can do these things. But this is something we need to bring in practice. It's not that we just talk about it and we don't do it. Even I, as a data scientist, should have the responsibility for making sure that I get the diverse data. And if not the diverse data, I should ensure that the performance metrics or everything being computed on it should be considered before deploying something. And Women's World Banking is using machine learning to support financial inclusion for women. It is important to insist on and support ML developers to center the voices of women and non-binary individuals in the development, creation, and management of these systems. Although examining these causes and solution is a very important step, but there are still many questions to be answered. And in general, from the social aspect or the industry, we need to develop more holistic approaches that addresses these biases of gender, racial, or gender identity, or any other, even other sensitive groups. Additionally, future research should consider data with broader representations of gender variance, and which will help us expand our understanding on how to handle expanding diversity. So I think I finished very quickly, but if you have more questions, then yeah, we can talk about them. Or we can also discuss about, yeah, your comments, your suggestions, and we can also talk about that.
Um, there are no questions in the Q&A part,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe I can ask something on my own. What do you think? I mean, will it be possible to regulate those ethical and fairness issues within AI products?
Yes, so we definitely, as a scientist or the machine learning developer, I can or we can ensure together that the data have lots and lots of diversity in it. And if not, then we should tune our machine learning algorithms in that way. So I think that that's really possible. It's just that it's not. So awareness is must to do something, right? So this is the issue. It's not there is very less awareness, and that's why it's not being tackled at the moment. Yeah.
Let's see if there are questions. So Flore is recommending reading Data Feminism by Catherine de Iguazu, but there are still no questions. um, any last
Uh,
questions? Okay, if there are no more questions, so we'll finish earlier. So thank you
that's
very
true.
much.
just to answer, I think I see one question at least reading this data feminism. So yes, I also had the example in my slide deck, and I really like that book. So it's that data feminism part. So it's really good if you can give it a thought, and I would recommend it.
Also, two recommenders, so I have to read it now. I haven't read it.
I just can't find where the example was in my slide, but yeah, I recall that I had it.
Also wanted to share with the audience that I looked at DALI 2. It connects two lectures, one that we have about generative and AI and your lecture about biases. And I looked for biases in DALI 2, and although they try to eliminate the bias, um, there are still gender biases and other biases in this generative model, and it's a very, very hard problem, and we need to make sure we don't put lipstick on a pig, that we really fix the models. So thank you again, Shalvi, and I will put the thank you video, and that will end my hosting for today. Flo will take over.
Thank you.